Hi, I'm Reverend Rodrigo Solano, bringing the church closer to you. There are some things that we have become used to seeing and being part of around this time of year, in the spring and summer. Some of us make vacation plans to visit people or places that are special for us. Some of us simply look to spend more time outdoors in the public areas that are usually accessible across Windsor Essex, including events and festivals that are part of the yearly spring and summer cycle where we live. Some of the younger folks in our lives may have looked forward to graduation ceremonies or graduation celebrations like prom. There may have been summer jobs in the works or new school settings to explore, some of which may now be in question or will likely look different than what was expected. As we go on our current lives, the real ones that we wake up to in the spring and summer of 2020, those other lives that we thought were going to happen may also be living alongside us in a kind of parallel timeline that nags us, telling us around this time we would have done such and such. We've all reached different levels of acceptance to these discrepancies. But it is likely that these parallel lives are there, somewhere in the back of our minds. There is a strong biblical tradition of dealing with discrepancies in our realities. These are often found in the book of Psalms and in other portions that are categorized as lamentation. The hymn, Rivers of Babylon, originally written by the reggae group The Melodians and later popularized by the group Boney M, draws from two Psalms, 137 and 19. If you ever sing the hymn, which in our hymnal uses the original lyrics by the Melodians, you may have wondered who King Alpha is in the lyric, "How can we sing King Alpha's song?" Since the original biblical text uses the words, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?" as is written in the psalm. But the Melodians wrote the song as a Rastafarian hymn, where King Alpha stands in for Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian emperor who is seen as a messianic figure in Rastafarian tradition. With that imagery, Babylon can be used as a stand-in for any oppressive force, and Zion is a symbol of a long-lost hope. Let's talk a bit more about Psalm 137. It has the distinction of being perhaps the most easily datable psalm. Datable in that we know more or less when it was written. Because it refers specifically to the Jewish exile to Babylon or Mesopotamia, now modern-day Iraq, we know that it was written after the year 537 BCE. From this history of exile and captivity, we hear it as a song of lament. Its verses speak of a longing for a long-lost home. It gives witness to the oppression of an enslaved people whose traditions and songs were mocked. It also speaks with a surprising frankness about how the people feel about that oppression. Among the verses from Psalm 137 that are not included in the sung versions in hymns and the Melodian song is the anger and desire for vengeance upon their oppressors. If you're curious, I invite you to read Psalm 137. It isn't very long. And the last few verses may be shockingly violent, which probably explains why they aren't included in the most popular musical adaptations of that psalm. And that's the thing about psalms. They are frank. They speak of things lost or things longed for. They speak of injustice, and they speak of deep anger. Tellingly, they are characterized by describing life as it is, with all its imperfections, and sometimes its horrors. Lamentation is an entire genre in the collection of biblical texts. And there is so much of it, not just in the Psalms, but in other biblical books, because it serves an important purpose. The art of lamentation has many layers, but it can probably be summed up as the ability to unapologetically recognize and name the fact that things can suck. Sometimes we can phrase this politely as things aren't how we'd like them to be, or it could be better. But the frankness in the tradition of the Psalms also invites us to more direct language. My friends, over the past 3 months, I've been expressing many of the affirming aspects of our response to the pandemic. The fact that our church can continue to exist, survive, and even thrive while outside our building in an exile of sorts. The fact that many of us have found ways to maintain our community and even strengthen it. These are things worth celebrating, and it is important to make space for that. We've been doing that and will continue to do that. It is also important to allow space for lamentation, to recognize that things can also suck. It sucks that we haven't been able to share the same physical space together, and that we feel compelled to keep that practice for some time still. It sucks that we are required to forego or sometimes reimagine many of the parts of our church life, including the ways in which we can be involved in each other's lives. Many of you will also note and lament unwelcome changes in your lives. It sucks that you cannot meet with or hug your grown children or grandchildren. It sucks that summer plans have had to change or have even evaporated. Members in your family may have voiced similar sentiments. In many cases, you may have heard children voice an unexpected longing for school. Maybe they simply miss their friends. Often enough, they miss a special teacher, or the structured learning, or the sense of community among their peers, or the rituals of end of year, like graduation or signing yearbooks, or even the feeling of the last day of school. And children and teens will, quite unequivocally and without euphemism, tell you that this sucks. In the wider world, you will have seen people commenting, or you may have commented yourselves about those things that suck in society. We've been talking about racism. We've been talking about economic inequality and inadequacies about how people's work is valued and sometimes unappreciated. It is important to be able to name these things and recognize that they have an effect on us. To recognize that we can get grumpy, angry, or sad about the chasm that exists between the parallel timelines of different realities. But, and there is often a but in the tradition of Psalms, there is also opportunity to participate or even create a new direction in the parallel timelines ahead of us. In the biblical text, there is often a turning point after the lamentation portion. What my Old Testament professor academically referred to as the but clause. That moment when we have recognized the parts of our lives that don't conform with our expectations of how our life or the world should be, and then search for those things that support us, naming our longings and a new resolve to see them through. We often do both of these in our ritual of joys and sorrows. And when we do that, we name our laments as well as recognize those who are around us and those things that inspire us to be in a new relationship with life. Be that the stars, the flowers, the people we rely on, or even our breath, the spirit of life that allows us to get up in the morning. My friends, we do not need to shy away from the gaps in our lives that leave us wanting more, but it is helpful to name them. Sit with that reality, and then search for the resources that will allow us to create something different and inspiring. May we make it so. In solidarity. Amen.